Hello, good afternoon. So I've got me some notes again on my little post-it note things, but just want to talk about relationships. And I know when I first started listening to the Love Doctor podcast, she talks a lot about the different attachment styles. And I think that's really important because, everything that I'm hearing through therapy, through these coaching podcasts, motivational speakers, all this is, you know, no, a or a shitty childhood does not okay you to be a shitty adult. That's not at all what I'm trying to say through my journey, nor is any of these people trying to say. But our body does keep score. Our body reacts, recoils, PTSD. There's things that we may not even be aware of that trigger us, and then our reaction is because of that. So first you have to become aware of that. You have to know what and why and how it's triggering you, and then you need tools. You need to work through the trauma. You need to know why. So again, it's not me or no one else is saying, oh, you had a shitty life, or I had a shitty life, or a childhood, so that's okay for me to be a crappy human being today. No, not at all. It's not an excuse. It's a why, and you're going to have to realize that and acknowledge that and understand that. But that isn't all of it either. Then therapy is so good. When I first started therapy, I was doing twice a week. I just felt like I had a lot of anxiety and things that I needed to work through. The depression wasn't as bad, but it was hit and miss. And then I just really needed to get my anxiety under control so that my depression didn't take over, or I didn't, snap and be that shitty human being. Talking about relationships though, and this can be, your friendships, your love interest, your partner, your husband, whatever. But I always tell my kids that all relationships are going to go through their ups and their downs, their valleys, their good times, their bad times, whatever. But if your bad outweighs the good in that relationship, it's probably time to evaluate that. Try to have a talk with the person. Some people are not open to conversations. Some people do not think they have anything that they need to heal from. They do no wrong. And that's when you need to be making some hard decisions. We all have something we can work on or be better at. And if you're in a relationship, like I said, it could be friendship, work relationship, love interest. If that person is always blaming you and never sees that they do anything wrong, that's a red flag. So I would definitely say, try to sit down and talk. There have been times when I didn't think that my husband was willing to change, but then when we talked, then I saw what I needed to change, and then he was also willing to change. Or I'm not saying that you can change people, but change behaviors or do something. Oh, I wasn't aware that that bothered you, or I wasn't aware that was important to you. I will try to be better about that. One thing that is very important to me is a lot of acknowledgement. And even 35 years of marriage, my husband, he's not going to do it. He will do it when it's me and him or in a text between me and him. But he does not go on social media and talk about, how in love he is with me or how much this or that. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't love me or that he thinks less of me. And it took me a long time to realize that, because I'm like, I'm all about it and I post and I do this and I do that, but that's not him. One thing I heard too is there is not a couple that has worked through things and wish they hadn't. So think about that. Okay. You've got a couple and whether they're married or dating, living together, whatever, and things aren't working out. Things are going bad and something's happened. Um, the relationship went into a valley and they work through it and they're happy. They're stronger. That is the hopeful, desirable outcome, right? But let's say that you try everything you can, you've worked through it, you've went to couples therapy, you've talked, you've tried to change, they've tried to change behaviors, and it just still isn't clicking. And then they end up splitting up, divorce, whatever. You can't say that that didn't work in those exact words and just feel like it was a complete waste of time. The relationship did not work, but you still worked on healing. So if you just bounce from one relationship to the next and never fix a problem or the wounds, and I'm not saying that, you're the problem or they are the problem, but there was a problem and it wasn't worked through. You're going to regret that, but you're not going to regret going through the steps and trying to process what's going on in that relationship, becoming a better person because of it, and working on something that you might have needed to heal. You can't force the other person to go to therapy. You can't force the other person to change. You can't force the other person to do anything. But if the relationship doesn't work, that just made you better for your next relationship. And maybe that's the forever relationship. But so, even if you're going through all the steps and going through all the process and the relationship doesn't work out, count it as a blessing in disguise. You did your part, you did your due diligence, so to speak, and you're healing yourself for all your other relationships, your kids, your work life, your next relationship, marriage, whatever. If you don't work through it, what you're going to do is you're going to take that trauma from that relationship and that hurt, whether you were in the wrong, they were in the wrong, both were in the wrong, you're going to take that to the next relationship. And then you're going to start, I like the phrase, bleeding on someone that didn't cut you. So now you're in this new relationship because the last one didn't work and you didn't heal the trauma. And then this new person does something and it brings you back to your previous relationship. Now they're to blame for everything that the other person did. Is that fair? No. Work through betrayals as partners. That is something that is hard because sometimes you can only discuss it so much, whether you're the one that betrayed or you were the one that was betrayed. Because if you were the one that done the betrayal, you already feel like shit. And then every time it gets brought up, you're ashamed, hopefully. You're ashamed, you feel like shit. That wasn't, the person you wanted to be or the thing you wanted to do, because now you're trying to work through this relationship. And if you're trying to work through this relationship, surely to God, you love the person and you didn't mean to betray them. But you got to understand that it's hard. It's hard for you because you are the one doing the things that hurt the other person, and nobody wants to hear all the negative things that we've done. But then the person that was hurt, they need to have their time to heal too, and you're not going to be on the same page. You may be over it, or they may be over it, and the other one isn't. But that's the thing, is sometimes too when they want to bring that back up and you're like, wait, I thought we were healed, I thought we were done, I can't process this anymore. You either hurt me so bad that I don't want to relive this again, or I hurt you so bad I don't want to relive this again. But one thing my husband said that triggers for him, or has in the past, is the state, a name, a time period, things like that. And by us talking about that, it has helped those triggers. And then you got to prove yourself. When you've broke someone's trust and betrayed them, you've got to reprove yourself. And that can take years. So if you're the one that was betrayed, try to remember that you want this relationship to work, and you can't keep throwing that in the person's face. But if you're the one that betrayed, you also have to understand that every time something doesn't seem right, they're going to feel like that's happening all over again. Again, why I strongly think that couples therapy is so important. But right now, my husband's at a point, he's like, why would I do that? Why would I go talk to a complete stranger, dredge up all these feelings and relive all that pain? But I have to let him. I have to work on me and let him process and deal it himself. And maybe he'll see, hey, Michelle's going through all this counseling, and she's sharing, and she's writing a book, and she's doing all these things to try to help other people to see that they can have a better life, even with all this trauma that's happened, and be a better person. And maybe I need to quit being stuck on this thing and go for some healing. And, one thing that I keep trying to stress to my husband is that trauma of what I did to you is going to carry through your life. It won't just magically disappear in 6 months or a year or 3 years or a day, but until you really heal and work through it, that trauma is going to carry through for you. But again, like I said, he's not ready or willing or able to do that yet. And so I've got to let it be. I've got to let him. And then I got to, as Mel Robbins says, let me. So let me. What can I do? What can I fix about myself? And that's why I'm doing the counseling, the TikTok, the videos, my website with the blog, with writing my book. And, I was bleeding on him for things that had happened to me in my childhood, but then it hurt our marriage. And that was unfair to him. Forgiveness only happens when you stop wishing things were different. And that really hit me, because for so long, I wish I hadn't done this, or I wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I hadn't said that. And not just with my husband, with everything. So, I had a falling out with my grandmother. I had this with my husband and an ex. But to say, I wish this had been different, or I wish I hadn't done that, is somewhat human. It's normal, especially when we have regrets and we don't want to hurt somebody, but we did. But you have to forgive yourself. You made a mistake. You're human. We're all going to make mistakes. And I know there's people out there like my grandmother who says she doesn't make mistakes. She's not sorry. And I mean, that must be a lonely island that you're on. But you've got to quit wishing things were different. And what can I do to move forward? What can I do to not repeat that mistake, that betrayal, that hurt? Or, we hear so much about generational families having problems and causing pain and abuse and neglect. And it can stop with you. It's stopping with me. We can also love someone profoundly, but hurt them profoundly. And I know my husband thinks that when I was talking to this other person, that my love for my husband wasn't where it should be. And I will tell you right now, that is so different. What few close friends knew what was going on, I cried and all the time. I don't want to hurt Scott. I do not want to hurt him. He is such a good man. He's so good-hearted. I don't want to hurt him. I don't want to hurt him. I just don't know why my heart won't let go of this other situation in person. And it wasn't even really that person. It was just, I was reverting back to 15-year-old Shell, because that was the happiest my childhood had been. And it was ripped away from me. So, I didn't mean to hurt my husband. That was never my intention. I hate that I did. And now I realize my why, and I'm fixing it. I've severed all ties. I've blocked on Facebook. If I'm not blocked, he's blocked, no communication. And sometimes it's hard because, that person was still a part of your life. And you do think, oh, well, maybe that was their birthday, or this tragic thing happened to them. I wonder how they're doing. Or again, that's normal. But I was so fixated on this individual that it was seriously unhealthy. I think it was unhealthy for me. I know, because I just kept putting myself out there, chasing him, and he wasn't interested. I was stroking his ego when somebody had dumped him, when life didn't seem as good, when he needed someone that wasn't going to be a commitment. And I kept allowing that to happen. Affairs or talking to someone, whether it's physical, emotional, whatever, they give you a dopamine burst. And what do I mean by that? They drown out any past trauma or any current situation that you're going through. So what I found, and as I'm evaluating why I did what I did, was money would get hard, another issue would happen, or there was, these major life stresses going on. And that's when I would turn to this person the most. And, now I understand that, because this person wasn't helping me solve real life issues. They weren't going to fix my financial problems. They weren't going to fix any problem, but they took me away from that problem. And it gave me that dopamine burst. It was like, oh, something happy, something positive. But then, a day or two down the road, I would just get my feelings hurt and thrown out like trash. So, and then I just kept going back. How many of you have done that? How many of you have been in a relationship that is bad for you, but yet you just can't sever ties, and there's something that keeps drawing you back? And all relationships are going to have their valleys and their peaks. You want someone that is going to stick with you through the good and the bad, and be there when you're down to lift you up, and you're going to lift them up when you're down, or when they're down. But again, the relationship should not be mostly bads and consistent hurts and no growth, no trying to, hey, that bothered me, or that hurt me when you did that. Oh, well, I'll try not to do that again, and I'm going to work on that, and then truly working on it. If the person just keeps doing the same thing over and over, and you're expecting a different outcome, remember, that's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and over, expecting a different outcome. Because if they're not working on it, what's hurting you, or you're not working on what's hurting that person, you or they don't deserve to be in that relationship, because there's no growth happening. You're just re-traumatizing yourself over and over. I thought this was interesting too. Affairs are people looking for a part of them they are searching for, or they feel they have lost. And that made so much sense to me. So while mine wasn't really a physical affair, it was an emotional affair, but it was of an ex that I was very seriously involved with when I was younger. And I think I was looking for a 15-year-old Shell again, and having the family and the life and the stability that I never had as a child. And one of the best things that happened was when I went back to Utah. We went to Dugway where we lived on the military ground, and 1989 no longer existed. Streets, homes, everything were totally different. I was so lost in this little bitty town, little bitty military base. And I only saw one person from my past that wasn't family. And she's a very dear friend of mine. And we still have a friendship, and we're planning a trip next year, me, her, and our husbands, that I'm looking really forward to. But it was good for me to see. I mean, your brain knows, you're not dumb. You know that Dugway, Utah does not still look like it did in 1989. The same people are not still there. But no one else wanted to see me besides my one friend. And that's fine. Some of them moved away and whatever. But that was eye opening. So I knew who mattered and who was going to be in my life. And that was my friend Misty. And it gave me different memories now of Utah. We went in the mountains and we went here. I showed them this or that, but I also saw different things I never saw the whole time I lived there. And so now when I think of Utah, I don't think of 1989 and my ex-boyfriend that I loved dearly at the time. And I think of my 2025 trip with my husband, my daughter, and my family. So that was a good thing. Sometimes our past traumas, we can't go visit. That wasn't there was a trauma there because of how I got brought back to Indiana, and I was thinking it was for a visit, but I got left here. But my real trauma didn't happen there. So if you have real trauma that happened, I'm not saying go back and visit that, because that may not be feasible. That may not be a good idea. It may be too triggering, but work through that with a counselor. If you're chasing a boyfriend, girlfriend, ex, husband, wife, whatever that is, they're not interested if you're the one doing all the chasing. And I knew that for so long. But then he would pull me back in and make me feel all special and warm and fuzzy again and really important. And then as soon as I would get that feeling and confidence back, drop me like I was a hot potato and want nothing to do with me and yell and scream at me and block me and this and that. One of the last times that we really were talking and I thought things were going well and maybe possibly see if things would work was 2019. Scott and I had filed for divorce. And, he would in one breath, though, tell me, like, I'm really healing from my last relationship. I just don't know if I'm ready for a serious relationship. But then he'd say, well, you never know. We might end up back together. You never know. I mean, we did have a good thing. And then he would call and text me or, be right there for me when I was down or whatever. But then it was actually, I was getting ready to go for a job interview, which he knew. And I had tagged him in something because I didn't remember a lot of Utah. I was 15. I didn't really drive all around Utah. We were on a military base, 2.5 hours from civilization. And so I didn't know the area like I know Indiana, where I've lived the majority of my life. And so I'd always ask, is that north, south? Is that by this? Is that by that? I don't know that city. And so on Facebook, I had tagged him with a Dora the Explorer map thing, like, where's my map? And said LOL and tagged him. And that was it. Nothing romantic, nothing that, signaled that we were a thing or whatever. And he literally went off on me through call and text, blocked me on Facebook, deleted the post. You would have thought that I would have put a picture of his most sacred thing being tore up or on their deathbed, or I tore him apart, and I hadn't. But now I know what happened. He was already talking to someone, and I was just there when they weren't available. And I was there to stroke his ego and to tell him he was worthwhile for this other relationship. I was giving him his dopamine. And then he was going to this other girl, building this relationship. So don't chase a relationship. If they're interested, it will be mutual. You'll want them, they'll want you. If you have to chase, bye. That's what I would say. I wish I had sooner, but I was so broken. I didn't know my why, and I didn't know how to stop. I remember telling a few of my good friends, I don't know what it is. I just can't shake him. I can't get him out of my heart, out of my mind. Finally, he hurt me enough, but it still took some time. It took going back to Utah, seeing things are different, getting into therapy to get him out of my head. And I will always consider him my first love. And I care about him. I hope he's doing well. I hope things are going well for him. I hope that he has a happy life. But I'm done. I'm done with that. You used me and hurt me, and I allowed it because I was broken. And I was looking for a version of myself that I no longer knew or had, that I felt like I had lost. And it wasn't healthy. It was not a healthy relationship. And I was hurting my own marriage. So that's just some thought. I've been kind of listening to things and working through things in therapy, and I just wanted to share that. Now, I am not saying by any means if somebody cheats on you, especially if it's physical, to go running back to them. That is a you decision. That is whether you can forgive them and get past it. And is that relationship, after this healing is done from that affair, going to bring you more joy than hurt? Because what I started out with is you're never going to regret working through that. Even if that relationship doesn't sustain and last, you're going to be a better person for the next relationship, for your next venture, for that happy moment in life where somebody's treating you like you deserve to be treated. But if you go into a relationship that would have been a good relationship unhealed, you're going to bring that trauma in and possibly upturn that good relationship because you weren't ready. So get the healing, do the work. It's not fun. It can be painful. But the flip side of that is I have more happier days now. I don't feel so much anxiety. Still working on that because there's still some things that give me anxiety that shouldn't. But I do have more happy days. I do make better decisions in my day-to-day life. I am a better wife and a better mother and a better friend because I'm not living as a broken person trying to mask as a stable person. And that is one thing I just want to be so true and honest on here. That's my platform. I want to help people I would love to get involved with, something to do maybe with Todd Chrisley and helping nonviolent offenders. Because I don't believe if you've been murdered, you need to be out, or if you've murdered someone, you need to be out of prison. But nonviolent offenders and helping them to work through their trauma of their past that caused them to get where they're at, and then when they are released from jail, making better decisions to be able to be a better person and a better equipped to handle life so that they don't return back to prison.